Well, one thing led to another.
Yes.
As it often does.
Usually.
It's when one thing leads to nothing that I'm feeling now that I have a problem with.
Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. You know who you are. And that was Michael Feldman talking about what happens when one thing leads to nothing. If you know who Michael is, he needs a little introduction, but for those of you who don't, I'll give you a little of the backstory. He was, for 30 years, the host of the nationally syndicated radio show, Whad'ya Know. It was something that he launched and maintained from his home and my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. And earlier this year, against his will and his better judgment, it was taken off of the air. Whad'ya Know was a quiz show with a variety component, a live band, an announcer, a live audience, and people who called in. And it was all really just pretext for Michael to riff with his audience. He loved his audience. He loved getting his feet wet, his hands dirty, and riffing. In that way, I always saw him as a real improviser. He had a kind of musician's mentality about the way he approached things. And he also reminded me of Groucho Marx. This week, following popular demand from his audience, missing his show, he starts a podcast. Michael and I spoke a few weeks ago while he was in this interim, this flux, this middle period between losing his radio show and starting his podcast. And he was raw. He was honest. He was very real with me. I've known him since I was a boy. He hosted a morning show from a diner on the local community radio station in Madison. My dad and I used to stop by that diner on the way to school and hang out. I used to try out material on the air. Michael, I think, was the first person I saw on the radio, or who let me talk on the radio at least, and I credit watching him with really influencing me. Thinking about Michael, I'm left feeling that there's something related to the jazz point of view about him. He's committed to improvising. He loves the risk of the unknown, and he's nourished by his audience. In fact, you get the sense that his relationship with his audience is among the most fulfilling things in his life, if not the most fulfilling part of his life. That might explain why, despite a few attempts in his career to apply his radio persona to television, it never really worked because he needed that possibility of failure, that risk, that unknown element that television simply didn't provide. We got together at Michael's work house. It's not the house he lives in, but the one that he works out of. And it's funny because it feels like, well, almost like a college student's house. He's a totally grown man. He's got a family and a house that he lives in. And then he's got another house just filled with all the stuff. It's like a man cave almost. It's filled with all of the stuff that, he just kept outside of his real life and put into his work life. Or maybe that was his real life. In any case, we sat at the kitchen table in his workhouse, and we talked. We began our conversation by talking about how he got started in radio. I love hearing these kinds of stories, the stories about a life in radio. It's very similar to the sort of self-invented, self-directed life of musicians, comedians, I guess anybody who goes through an entire lifetime and an entire career without ever really having a job. I guess maybe that's why I relate to it. Anyway, without further ado, here we go, my conversation with the great Michael Feldman.
What is this for, anyway?
So I'm not kidding when I told you that a couple of years ago, after avoiding it for most of my adult life, I decided I wanted to start interviewing people.
Oh.
When I wrote to you and said that maybe something rubbed off from your morning show at Dolly's when I was a little kid.
When you dominated it.
Well, that's if you're going to be on the radio. What's the point of doing it if you can't dominate?
How old were you? You were like 10 or something.
I must have been younger because I moved to the West Side when I was 10.
Yeah.
I thought about you, and that you're probably my first radio personality memory that I can think of. Yeah. So it's your fault. But
it's good though, man. I got to give you credit. It was very good stuff.
This is for a podcast, which it seems apropos because I know that you are entering the podcast fold shortly as well.
Grudgingly.
So what does that mean?
What does what mean? Podcast or grudgingly?
Grudgingly.
I don't know what either means, to tell you the truth. That's the problem. Another stupid lack of innovation type innovation. There are many technological innovations in this current age, and all of them are pretty useless. Or they might be really innovative, but used for totally banal application.
And you think the podcast may be among them?
Yes, I know that it is. Podcast is stupid. We used to call them making recordings. I had a little tape recorder from Olson Electronics many years ago, and it was reel to reel, and we we'd do things together. We'd call up people and tape them, give away fake prizes and stuff, and that was a podcast.
When was that?
That was many years ago.
Was that before you were a
That
professional?
was in the 60s, you know.
So this is you as a teenager,
Yes.
as a college...
I used to make crank calls and give away Boy Blue ice cream for knowing the capital of Belgium.
So you'd call people up, give them a trivia
Out of the
question.
phone book.
Out of the
See,
phone
we don't
book.
even have phone books anymore. That's how old it is.
No, but this is serious. So this is you.
I am
this
serious.
Is
So
a young you making crank calls, asking people
Crank
to
calls,
answer a
but
trivia question.
as a radio show, but it really wasn't. It was a podcast.
Clearly, what you ended up doing is a direct extension of that.
I don't see that. You do a lot of things when you're kids. I used to make bombs and put them in milk chutes.
Okay, so but what you're saying
So
is
and I didn't become a bomber, is what I'm saying.
yet.
That's a good point.
If you're not ready to retire, then there's still hope for a second career.
I could see going that way.
But one thing that you did do that you're saying for real is that you were interested in trivia. You were interested in at least pretending to be a radio host, and you liked.
I won a
engaging with
contest.
people.
I won 2 contests in high school to be on the radio, WRIT and WOKY in Milwaukee, both rock stations. So I got to go on WOKY with Bob Berry, who was the 5th Beatle at that time. Actually, the 5 millionth and 5th Beatle, but the one in Milwaukee. And I got a half-hour radio show, so I got to play Louie Louie, you know.
How old were you?
I was at Washington High School. I was probably about 14, 15. I did all this stuff on the radio show, and afterwards Bob Berry said to me, "You're good, but you talk too much." He said, "You introduce the record, you give the time or the weather, and then you play the record." So I said, so I didn't. That actually sort of killed off any interest I had in radio until I stumbled across it many years later.
Because they told you talked to
But
him.
I had Bob Berry on my show many years later. We did a show at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee, and he didn't remember me at all. And I remembered him.
I mean, it's interesting that you say it killed off any, desire. That
Well, I
you
didn't
had
think
to
about it. He said, I'd go to college and,
do something else.
yeah, that's what he said.
So what did you think about after your first brief dream of radio? What did you
Nothing.
think about?
I thought about girls.
Well, it's been good talking.
No, I mean, what do you think about when you go into high school? You're in high school, and then you
Yeah.
think about. I thought it might be a good way to meet girls, being a disc jockey. But
I mean, everybody I
I can't
talked
say I
to
ever met one that way, except my wife came to my show, and that was, so that's a mixed result. Unintended consequence.
It's nothing but disappointment when you're on the radio and somebody finally sees you. Even if you're the greatest looking guy in the world, you're never going to be what they
Yes,
picture.
and I never was the greatest looking guy in the world, but I had a je ne sais quoi.
And you reeled one in.
I had, I'll tell you what's embarrassing is I had one stalker in all these years. 31 years in the radio, I had one stalker, and I won't tell you her name.
It's
and
embarrassing
she even
that
went
you-
away after a while. But for years, probably, maybe close to 20 years, she stalked me. And she would be there at certain, we'd go somewhere, and she lived in a certain state in the South, and anything contiguous, she would be there. And something that suddenly wasn't contiguous, and, But, that's a pretty low count.
So the embarrassment is that in 31 years you only had one stalker.
Yeah.
You would have liked one or two more.
I'm not saying that I, would be that kind of a human being.
Right.
But it certainly is. It makes it feel like you have some worth,
Because there
some
is
impact.
So you made an impact on somebody's life.
Yes. Mainly, my biggest fans have always been like middle-aged men who are still living at home with their elderly parents, and guys who work for the post office. No jokes about postal. They're my guys, especially the rural route carriers who listen to the show on their routes, and I could ask them where they were when they were stopping because they had time. They always have sandbagging time in the post office. Mm-hmm. So you get there like a half hour early, you can sit there under a tree or something. So, those guys, I owned them. And for some reason, groundwater people.
What are groundwater people?
People who work with groundwater is their thing. I've never understood it either, and I kept meaning to ask them over the years, but we had a lot of groundwater people. Hydrologists.
How did you get these stats? How do you get the statistics?
It's just for people calling and saying, "Oh, what are you doing?" I say, "I'm in groundwater, or I'm on my route now delivering the mail out in wherever,
Right.
Rhinelander.
I want to talk about how you set this up, because you also set up a model that, particularly at the beginning, was really unheard of to do from Madison, to set up something that existed on a national scale but done locally. And I want to talk to you about how you did that. And
Go ahead then.
So tell me, you put radio
Don't
out of your
want to
mind.
talk to me. Talk to me about it. You know,
Okay.
that's another phrase I can't say.
Oh, you don't like that one?
Like
I want to ask
I
you.
want to say, don't want to say it. Say it. You know?
Okay.
Okay.
Here is me asking.
Okay. Sorry. I don't mean to be hard on you.
No, I
feel I have the right.
You do.
You took over my show for about a year or two there.
You're talking about
at Dolly's Fine Foods.
Yeah. Well,
on the way to school.
I
was outdone by you.
The rule in the entertainment business is no animals and no children. Don't let them near you.
It's a good rule.
Yeah. On the radio, especially, animals make for really bad dead air.
I did an anaconda thing not long ago in Kansas City, but they don't let it actually constrict around your neck. They stop it but it starts to.
So you felt it?
Yeah.
Just enough to contemplate your own finite time on the planet?
Yes, I had only a few weeks left in my career anyway, so it didn't matter a whole lot.
It was going to, one way or the other, you're going to get squeezed out. So you put radio out of your head when they told you talked too much, and you thought about girls, and you went to college, and at some point you sat behind a microphone again. You decided to do radio.
It wasn't until I taught high school, and then I taught high school coming back here. I was in Kenosha, I taught high school, and I came back here.
What did you teach at high school?
English as a second language for Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back here and I volunteered at Ward. And they wanted me to deliver their Back Porch Pilot newspaper, so I didn't come back again for a while. Then I went back in, and I inherited someone's Friday night show. It was a call-in show, for the desperate and the bedridden, on a Friday night, calling into Ward.
Community radio, local community radio.
You could say that, yes. It's in the community, and it is radio.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. People would call in. I don't know what they want. So I call it thanks for calling. People would call in, and a lot of them were bedridden, or in stage 4 of some horrible. I don't know. I didn't know what to say to them, but I was there for them, and I said thanks for calling. My model actually for doing a show is always in Milwaukee. There is a guy who did a show called Ask Your Neighbor. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful show on WTMJ. He didn't know anything. People would call in and say, "How do you get blood out of a pillowcase?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I don't know." I mean, he knew by then because this has been asked like 10,000 times on the show. I don't know, but let's ask our neighbors. And so someone would call him with the answer. So he was just the middleman, and that's sort of, I'd say, more what my show is based on. Mm-hmm. It was actually not having any expertise.
But you're a matchmaker. You're gonna.
I always tell my audience. I always used to tell my audience, I'm an empty vessel. Fill me. Mm-hmm. So that's. It was more along those lines of ask your neighbor, I would say.
Friday night at Ward.
Yeah, my first thing. It wasn't. But, it was good enough so that the guy, Jeff Lang, who was then like the station manager at Ward, if you can imagine there being a station manager at Ward.
You mean somebody in charge?
Yeah, he was someone to blame.
Yeah.
He was the guy to blame. He heard me on that and said, I would like to stream, he was already talking like, I want to stream our morning programming on WORT, where, it's Etruscan music, Mondays, and Bavarian. Every day was something. Women's music, Wednesday and Thursday. I get 2 days for some reason. And it's spelled WIMMIN, and that's their right.
That's some old East Side Madison stuff there.
That's a good spelling.
Yeah.
He said he wanted to stream it, and he said, I said, would you like to do it? And I said, well, I knew. First of all, I was walking into a shitstorm.
What do you mean?
You can say that in podcasts.
Sure you can.
I'm told. Yes.
That's one thing you can say.
Because there are all these groups, this is community radio, whatever, but it's all these little groups fighting over airtime and what should be on there, what shouldn't be on there. And, it was terrible.
Well, this is the thing about community radio that I felt early on was that they may be responsible to a lot of people and a lot of things, but their listeners are maybe at the bottom of the list in a lot of ways.
Definitely. That's true of radio in general, I find. Public radio included, by the way.
That the listeners maybe are not at the top of the list of people that you're worrying about.
It's not about listeners.
Yeah.
It's about what they're going to do next.
Yeah.
The next drop-ins and seamlessness and all. There are all kinds of trends and buzzwords in public radio. So anyhow, he was going to stream it, and I said, well, I'd be interested in doing it. It'd be fun to do. It was like 6 to 9 in the morning was their morning show, But I'd have to do it from a remote because if I work in the studio, I just sit there.
You need to be out with people.
Yeah, I have done studio shows, And I know I tend to sit there. I have to be engaged somehow, and I need someone there to either to
Bounce off of.
pick on or bounce off of, or I have to engage. So they said, well, okay, we'll do it from Dolly's Fine Foods, 6 to 9 in the morning. So I'd go there with a suitcase filled with a little mixer, and I had I had 2 mics, and I had stand for one. The other one I put in a water glass, and that was my setup. And then we plugged in behind the jukebox there. They put in a line there back to the station, and they'd play music back from the station. And we had one phone line, the phone there, and actually rang, and it was a phone. That was innovative. And otherwise, I just talked to people who came in. And the first hour was mostly pretty much self-reflection.
Mm-hmm. Every morning.
Every morning, yeah. And then by 7, people started coming in, and then various groups, community action groups would come in, and by 8 o'clock or something, I wasn't interested in it anymore. I just put up with it.
How many years did you do that show?
About 2 years.
It's not that long, but in that time, that's when you got your radio jobs.
Maybe 18 months. Yeah, I did quit on the air.
Why?
Well, I had a little disagreement with station management. It was WORT, and they were planning this big move. They were going to move downtown into the Civic Center and be the station of record in place of WHA, Wisconsin Public Radio. So they were going to be like all the city council meetings and shit. So I thought that was exciting, but no one knew about it except the people who were planning it, this little cabal planning it at the station. So I was outraged about it. So I just I played Elvis Costello, Clown Time Is Over, my last song. And I went down and I was going to fight the guy who was behind all this. I went down to the station looking for him, but he had left.
So what did you do?
I'm glad, because I think he probably could have beat me in a fight.
Oh, you were actually going to fight him?
I physically fight. I was so.
Did you take a photographer?
It was after like a 2-week, 10-day probably fun drive. So I went through the fun drive. All right, fine. And at the end of it, I knew I was going to quit, and so I quit. I just said I can't work for these people anymore. Played Elvis Costello and left, and went looking for him. Guys, it was personal. I didn't want to. It wasn't even. I was making some statement or something. It was a false sense of idealism, which I've since lost.
What did you do after you left? And what were you doing?
Drove cab.
Were you driving cab at that point already?
No, but I was soon after.
And that was how you made money?
Not really. I was very bad at it. I was the worst cab driver in the fleet, but at the time they were hiring, I don't know if your dad ever drove cab. Probably not. He always did pretty well. But almost every other musician or author or anyone, filmmaker, anybody in Madison was a filmmaker / cab driver.
Radio host / cab driver.
Or / throat, really.
Right.
It was the only alternative. So yeah, I was the new celebrity driver, but I was the worst driver on the road, and I used to turn my radio off because I didn't want to be bothered, and I didn't know where anywhere was outside of the basic isthmus.
Right, but it did give you a way to engage with people. I can
terrible.
imagine.
No, it was terrible. No benefit from that. I mean, there was a mic I could use.
Yeah.
But although we did do bits later, my next show at WHA did a show there, the show called The Dispatcher, where I was actually driving a cab, and I would call in and say, they'd be dispatching calls all around town, and I'd call in and say, and they'd finally say, 24, what is it? And I'd say, what was the role of dogs in the Revolutionary War? And Perry, who was there, who's got a great voice, Perry Benson, would answer. I wrote the thing out for him, but it was a history of dogs and Washington's dog and Howe's dog during one of the battles, and they stopped the battle to get their dogs back because they had left their tents. And he would read that. So there was some benefit from the cab driving experience, but it was limited.
Were you a trivia junkie early on in your life? But both your crank call and this are based on some sort of random trivia question that
It's a way for getting people to call you without talking about abortion rights.
Right.
A woman's body. I believe a woman's body is her own, but I don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's for her to talk about. Why should I even do that? That's presumptuous of me.
But something innocuous, something.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Coming back to do, Whad'ya Know after my fiasco in Chicago.
I don't want to skip that though.
I know, but I just want to say I said, all right, I really was enamored of being on WGN for a bit because you're on 18 states, 50,000 watts, So it's like being on national radio. I came back and said, hey, you want to do a show? No. if I did, I want it to be for national release or something, and I want it. Some way people calling in that won't be talk radio.
Yeah.
It can't do talk radio because then you have to be serious about things. So that we can do a quiz show.
Yeah.
It's purely for that reason. No love of trivia. Plus, it wasn't trivia. It was just small, insignificant knowledge.
The more insignificant, the better in a certain way. It doesn't matter how significant.
Some of it had great merit.
Yeah. So how did you get to WGN? How did you get out of Madison and the sort of local profile of the celebrity cab driver, radio dispatch guy?
Well, one thing led to another.
Yes.
As it often does.
Usually.
It's when one thing leads to nothing that I'm feeling now that I have a problem with. But I did another show from a remote type show from the Washington Hotel. Mm-hmm. And it called it AM Saturday. I didn't name that one because it was on the AM and it was on Saturday, so it was a natural call.
Truth in advertising.
Yes, from the Club de Wash, and they put checkered tablecloths on the table. It's a bar basically, and to make it look more like a breakfast nook. And it attracted mostly nurses coming off their job. They work for 3 days at a time or something, then they take 2 days off or some horrible. And they come in and get really plastered on Bloody Marys. So that was the biggest part of the audience in the back there. And then I did a show in front. And,
Loopy nurses.
And but anyhow, in the course of doing this, the program director from WGN came up one time, and because he had a daughter at UW, and heard the show. I never saw him or met him, and thought of me when they had an opening in the late afternoon down there at WGN. The guy left, and that's how I got it. He called me up and said, "You want to come down here?" And I said, "Sure."
What did you? You said sure, but
sure.
What did you think when you got that phone call out of the blue? Somebody from WGN heard you.
I don't remember what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I can tell you what I was thinking afterwards. It was, jeez. Well, the problem was they teamed me up with this woman, Catherine Catalane, who had been a helicopter reporter, traffic reporter on WBBM or somewhere, and she had a voice for it. It was like you could not think of anything. I'm a thinker when I'm thinking of the next thing is going to be and where it's going to go and flow. It's all flow with me. With her, it's all like talking over the props of a helicopter with some very backward Republican type concerns about I remember one show there was the strike in Las Vegas, big strike in Las Vegas. So she wanted to do a show on how you can get around it. I can still go to Las Vegas and get around the fact that they're being picketed, and still get to your hotel and still have a good time.
Advice for the tourists going to Vegas.
Yeah, the anti-union tourists.
Yeah.
Which, it probably played pretty well at WGN, but I couldn't.
Well, it sounds like a little culture shock coming out of the East Side enclave of Madison to
it
Chicago.
totally, man. I was so unprepared. Never done commercial radio, let alone read copy. So I would get the copy and try and fool around with it. And True Value takes it very seriously if you mess with their copy, the big guys could probably do it a little bit, but they know where to go and not. So they hated me immediately.
So how long were you on WGN?
The worst part of a year, I'd like to say. I thought, well, my wife to be came down there. I thought, we'll get married. This will save my job. Mm-hmm. We'll get married on the air, and it'll be a big thing and stuff. And we got married in November, and they fired me in December.
Did you get married on the air?
No, I wanted to, but they didn't really care that much. They didn't want to play it up. So if a marriage can't save you,
then what can?
I know. I should have had it annulled after that. Really, it was totally no point to it.
A marriage can't save your career, and your career can't save your marriage. But I do think that I hate to name it failure, but the challenges and the failures in our lives are the stuff that actually move us forward as much as any success ever will.
That's true.
So, what move did you make after the worst part of the year was over?
Well, I tried to stay down in Chicago because I wanted to get my name back, although I never had it. It was one of those things. Then I went to unemployment for a while. I was hanging down there and trying to get some. And I said, they said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "Well, morning drive would be good." And I, $40,000 maybe to start, but I'd want some headroom on that as things got going. And
editorial.
They said
control.
we have lawn service, and it was like $468 or something. Prices were pretty low at that time. I said, "Okay, I'll come back." But and then Jack Mitchell called from back here and said, "Want to come up and do a show?" That's Jack. And I said, "No." but I'll meet you halfway in Rockford at the Clock Museum. We'll talk about it. And that's when the whole pitch for, well, I don't know, but I'd like to do something big.
So who pitched who?
Well, he was into me coming back and doing a show there, and I pitched him this idea, which I thought he would reject, because it was preposterous to do a national show from Madison, Wisconsin, and have nothing based on nothing. Even before Seinfeld thought that's not an original idea at all. In fact, there's been lots of shows on nothing.
You have, after having tasted a bit of wider distribution, said, I don't want to go back to local. If we're going to do something, I want to do something big.
You know, I sat in for a lot of people on WGN, and it was cool. You know, I did some of the overnight shows, which is weird because the guy who was doing those was, 3 in the morning, and it's time for the wrestling segment, you know, so that sort of thing. It was a little unusual. But some of the other ones are really cool because you get, I did this one show I was filling in for somebody, somewhere, excuse me, and people were calling. This guy called in and said, listen, I live out in the country, but I'm not a farmer or anything. I said, but a friend of mine dropped a goat off here, and he didn't tell me anything about how to feed it or what to do with it. It's making this ridiculous noise, and so I said, well, I don't know, but let's ask our neighbors.
Yeah.
So, but then all these people started calling in from all over and about what to do, how to feed the goat, yada yada yada, and it was really kind of cool. And then a girl called in and said, there's a bat in my room. My boyfriend is totally useless, and he tried to catch it with a baseball glove. And how do I get rid of it? So we had people call in on the bats, plus all the bat protection is called in. But it was really cool. People were going back, and they were funny about it. I thought, this is cool.
And with a market that big, you're likely to find somebody who's listening somewhere who's going to pick up the phone.
Oh, yeah, and they're from all over, you know.
Yeah. And so that was seductive. That was, like, cool.
It was cool.
Yeah.
I thought, this is a really cool thing about radio. If you can connect people like this, and that's what your show is all about.
So that's really what you walked into your pitch with, was I want to do something big enough to connect people.
Yes.
To Jack Mitchell. That was the premise.
I can't reproduce WGN, but we could do a show here and have it go, a local show gone national, you know.
What did that, do you think, sound like to Jack Mitchell, or basically a local state-sized radio? Was it even the size of the state at that point?
Was what the size of the state?
WHAERN. Did they? What was their reach at that point?
They had Wisconsin Public Radio, and Jack was the guy who sort of made the network happen.
But it's before NPR.
No, he was. He's also on the board of NPR, which is how he got on nationally.
Yeah.
Jack was one of the founders of the whole NPR thing, and on All Things Considered and all that. And it was a liner behind it.
And that was like 76 or 78 or something in that period?
I don't know when that happened, but by the time
that existed.
Yeah. So he was on the board of NPR, so that's how we got on nationally. So when we first went on, we had like 10 stations in Wisconsin.
Right.
We did a 6-month run-up in Wisconsin. Then we went national, and we added 3, I think. Trying to think of what they were. Biloxi might have been one. I think Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I don't know. We had a total of 3.
National outside of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But it was a start.
It was. And word of mouth, soon we had another 4 or 5 within a matter of years. Now we did pretty good, actually. So it started to build. It's totally. Now the whole show actually never had any much of a PR effort behind it or a network behind it. Really, we were at NPR, then we went to PRI.
Yeah.
Out of Twin Cities, but never much promotion stuff. It was always word of mouth, really, that put it there. People
telling their friends and their family, and
and
would they have to actually call their station and request it? How would it grow?
I don't know how that worked, but it sort of worked that way, and stations became interested in having, and we started adding stations.
Michael Feldman talking about the growth of Whad'ya Know. Sure, it was 30 years ago, but in some ways it could be 100 years ago. Feldman's desire to do this one thing and his recognition that he was good at it, it's really beautiful. Here he talks about growing the show nationally and flirting with a sideline career in television. He gushes about his audience, how he applied some of the Jewish humor he grew up with to a generally Midwestern audience. He also considers the reasons his radio show might have been canceled before its time.
Did you, once you sort of set the format in motion, as it grew, did you have to sort of like, were there growing pains in terms of accommodating more listeners?
I'll say this for me. I've done almost the exact same thing my entire life in any area.
Which is what?
Of my life. It's whatever I do in a given situation. So when we first went on with Whad'ya Know, I did a lot more visual things because I thought they were funny on the radio. So we had like a tap dancer on my first show, taught me how to tap dance. And then I had a belly dancer come on, and you could just hear the coins. And I was enjoying it, but it was kind of a slap in the face, I guess. But I don't know. I thought it's kind of cool to hear, because it used to be radio was so much about hearing, sound actualities, taking you where you were and so forth.
Yeah.
And they still try to do that. But so I like that. I don't know. Bowling. We bowled in the studio was big, so we bowled. We brought some pins in there, and we bowled. The guy showed me how to bowl. I walked in high heels and one thing, and wore pantyhose on another. That might have been the same show. And I don't know, but things that were just stupid.
So you did more visual things.
And then Jack Mitchell said to me, you need to cut out the visual stuff.
And you obliged.
I did, and that's the only time you ever asked me not to do something. It's the only time I ever obliged. Your dad was on one of the first shows I did.
Did he tell you to do anything or not do anything?
He told me cash up front.
Yeah.
I said, what's the secret to your success? He said, cash up front.
Did that have any impact on your?
No, none.
No.
But he's done well by it.
Yeah, he told me that too, and I'm still not paying.
I don't know what it means.
I haven't learned it. Yeah,
I don't know what it means exactly, but I appreciated the fact that he said that.
That he had,
that he shared that.
He had a thing. He had some piece of wisdom that he believed was the secret.
Yeah, for a musician, I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah, I think so too. In radio, maybe it's cash after the fact.
Yeah, cash somewhere along the way would be good.
Did anybody else tell you anything or advise you in any way, or was it just basically you?
No.
On your own, sort of developed this.
Yes, and I tend to shut people out from any discussion of what I should be doing.
At what point?
It's a great quality I have.
Just be able to. Well, maybe it is though.
It's a Trump-like quality.
Yeah, you should run for something. Did you think you were good at it, being on the radio?
Yes. No, I thought I could. I obviously thought something I could do. I thought of it in high school. All I got to do is talk, and I can do that. Make fun of things or whatever.
Were you a class clown kind of person?
No, I worked the person ahead of me and to the right and left. 3 people.
Do you remember their names?
Donald Ertl was in front of me. Marshall Ganzero, I think, was on the right of me. I don't remember who this was.
I mean, when you say I worked the person in front and right
Dean
and left.
Himmelreich used to sit in front of me. That's what it was. Dean Himmelreich, and we became friends. Because I used to say things to the back of his neck almost my entire career.
I understand that that's the literal truth, but do you take any sort of greater meaning out of it? That you didn't work broad, you worked narrow, you worked specific?
I wasn't a class guy. I didn't have that sort of ego. But so talking into a microphone, you don't have to project, so it's ideal.
But you did set your show up in front of an audience.
Yeah, because I'm not afraid of audiences. I'm afraid of not having an audience. Now I feel terrible. I actually have lost a lot of self-esteem simply for not having an audience.
What happened, do you think, that started to lose the audience?
I don't think I ever lost the audience. I lost the stations.
And why is that, do you think?
Because the stations went on to whatever they're going to do, and the next thing they got in alliances with NPR and what programming would run, and programming changed and that sort of thing. But I was taken off in stations that we had great success in.
And you were on 30 plus years?
31.
For the first however many years, it was growing. You felt this thing growing, the audience.
Growing.
When did it reach peak listenership?
Probably 2005, probably.
So 20 years of grow.
Yeah.
And then at some point it started to decline.
Yes.
As it was growing.
Normal, everything's a bell-shaped curve,
Well, yeah, and that's the interesting. My dad has this song, "Be nice to the people on the way up. You're going to see them on the way back down."
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily where I see you at this particular moment.
No.
By the way, I'm here to tell you.
Yes.
The fact that we're sitting in your office house kitchen with some cheap lavs and a portable recording for my podcast, I don't want that to discourage you from what I'm about to tell you.
I'll tell you, this is going to be a breakthrough for me.
What this?
Once this gets downloaded, if anyone does.
Yeah, this could be the future here.
I know.
But
just to know that I'm available.
The podcast, to me, I stepped away from when I moved to New York 10 years ago. I stopped listening to the radio because I wasn't in a car ever. And I found that that's when I listened to the radio most of the time.
Yeah.
Podcasts have vitalized radio for me. And I'm living with radio and the audio life in a way that I hadn't in a long time. I think this is actually a really exciting time.
I'm glad for you. I was so happy for you. I really am.
But for you as well.
No, it's another American social media influenced phenomenon. You go to Europe, people are not listening to podcasts. We had some guys in, friends of my daughter's, she met from London, two guys. Do you listen to podcasts? No.
They listen to the radio.
Yeah, or they listen to their tunes or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't. And maybe radio is better in London. I suppose it is.
Yeah.
But in Europe and in Spain or wherever she goes, they're not walking around with their faces in their phones.
Well, that's true.
They're not walking around with earbuds in their phones. We're into this entire isolationist, personal space, media, everything. Is isolating. So it's called social media. It's socially isolating. And podcasting is another way of that. I mean, broadcasting goes out to a bunch of people at once. There's actually such a thing as audiences out there, whether you see them or not, But a podcast goes to a guy in a gym who's on a, stair stepper or something, and trying not to feel the pain,
And this is a crucial distinction, and obviously is pressing a button in you that you're uncomfortable with. The idea of a broad audience that's out there right now.
That makes me uncomfortable. How do you play to a guy who's on a stair stepper?
Well, you don't just play to one; you play to all the possible.
All the guys who are stair stepping. And if they were in unison, at least we would have something.
Right. So this is the distinction for you.
It's broadcasting versus narrowcast.
Yes, I see that, and it's something like really at the core of the identity of what it is very different. Even though it's audio, it's the format of your show can be the same. I see you're going to do it at the high noon.
Yeah, but you look at it in general. Netflix versus television. It's the same thing. You sit there and you gorge yourself on a show and you watch every episode of it.
Yes.
Sunny in Philadelphia or whatever it is, and you watch every one there is. And then, but you do it alone or you do it with someone else, maybe a buddy, and then, but it used to be TV shows were on and they were watching, they would say there would be like how many millions of people be watching the same thing the same time around the country. And, it doesn't exist anymore. In fact, that's why radio doesn't exist anymore. For that same reason. And there's radio is mostly listened to by roofers now. That's mostly country.
Well, you've had good luck with the water people and the mail people.
I don't get the roofer. I heard one guy who was doing a roof, this is just a few years ago, who had NPR on or something like that. Yeah. Okay, wow, cool. Inroads.
You felt like maybe this is...
We're getting a roofer.
Hope here.
We got a roofer here.
There's hope. As you felt the thing growing, and it had to feel good for your self-esteem, as the stations fell off, was it hard to maintain that same energy on the show?
No, not at all. Because my audience, I have my audience that comes, audience is there. We do shows on the road to the surviving stations. They're always great, always filled and so forth. I mean, a lot of the stations we left behind have very loyal audiences, And we had our listenership that could no longer hear us would then listen on there's a podcast of it. So, we picked up a lot of them that way to maintain it, So, our show is audience friendly, but it's also like audience based and audience enforced.
Yes.
I'm doing this podcast because my audience said, do a podcast. We'll pay for it. Then I went on Kickstarter and I thought, well, okay, maybe I can get money for this so I don't have to use my retirement to do it. I said, all right, fine, I'll do it.
And I saw that you raised twice what your goal was.
Yeah, we raised $20,000.
You asked for 10.
Asked for 10. Raised 20, and it was like 350 people gave $53 each just for a chance for me to do a podcast, And I'm very touched by it. I'm always touched by it. Honestly, I always say I'm the best audience a guy ever had. I'm sincere about it. I think I've had almost a unique relationship with an audience, and that is their family. We've had generations come through there. We had originally, the old men and they have kids, and then their kids have kids. We're at that point where their kids are having kids, and they pulled me off the air.
Did you see it coming?
Only 31 years. I hadn't even begun to say what I was getting at.
Oh, tell me what you're getting at.
It was generational. And I think, and I don't mean to be egoistic, or artistic, or autistic. I'm not ego-driven about this, I don't think, but it was unique. I don't know anyone else has done a show like this in terms. Garrison has a huge audience and stuff, but they don't know much about Garrison. And he does not walk among men. And I was right there in the middle of it, and people were, it was very personal and very interactive, and I honestly think that station people never really understood, not even at my own station. After Jack and all those people left years ago, some of the later program directors, and there's been a few of them, and station managers, I don't think they really got the connection, because they're not really, they don't look at audience first, and I look at audience first and only in what I'm doing,
Right. Well, this goes back to what you were saying earlier, right?
Yeah, it's all about audience. I tell them, you bring the show.
Yeah.
So
I'll be
I
here
owe you a
standing
lot.
in this room. You bring the show to me.
I said, it's an audience participation show. If it's a bad show, whose fault is
Uh-huh.
it? They say mine. I say, fine, I accept that.
Right. Despite the fact that you feel like you were even a little bit misunderstood in your own backyard,
I think so. I know so, actually.
In what sense? That you just got...
Oh, no. In recent years, I was even left off the fund drive brochures. They sent out material, the fund drive. They mentioned all the shows on the air, all their, local people and stuff. I wasn't even mentioned. I was mentioned in passing when they talk about weekends are fun on Wisconsin Public Radio, and they mentioned there, wait, don't tell me, and what do you know, which is produced right here. And it was on that level instead of extolling.
Right. You should have been extolled.
Should have been extolled.
Were there any other shows that came out of that environment that reached the same kind of audience that yours did? Did anything else come out of HA?
They have, to the best of our knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, and that never has gone as far. But
I wonder if there's just a kind of a provincialism in Madison that can't handle
that could be
that kind of success.
I think they were just uncomfortable with a show that they had no control over, and did not really. And I'm sure there were a lot of moneyed people, because there are a lot of moneyed givers.
Yeah.
At any sort of public radio station, they're the classical types, who probably would frown upon what I may have represented or not.
Yeah.
So there's possible that kind of pressure as well.
I remember at one point there was an attempt to migrate the format to television.
Yes, we tried to migrate that.
To do that migration.
Yes.
What do you think are the primary differences between working in radio and television?
They can see you on television. That's good for some people. So there's that, and television is not radio with pictures. I excuse me. I did some things with Disney. I did several station groups, and the thing with Disney, the Disney Channel one time. At one point, the Disney Channel thought they would go into some family type programming. Quiz show would be kind of cool. So they're going to do Whad'ya Know stuff. But the notes, we do a thing, and we kind of, we get an audience there, and we do it, and then you get notes immediately after the show. You sit there with the producer, and a couple other people. I didn't know who they were, and they say, you gotta, the glasses gotta go, and you gotta. Well, they suggested that I spray paint my head so that it matched, that all matched, and then. And then they said, well, we're trying to attract a younger audience. They said, maybe you could have Chippendale dancers play the quiz. Mm-hmm. And I said, I thought they were joking. Honestly, I thought they were joking about not the hair so much. That was just offensive. But Chippendale, I said, well, would I pull the questions out of there? And they said, no, that'd be great. And then you could have, attractive females, so forth. Mm-hmm. You could have an attractive female announcer. That's the only way to have. Get rid of Jim and get some, attractive female. That I thought had merit.
Maybe onto something there, yeah.
Yeah. I know. But I said, then we lose the old Norwegian audience.
Yeah.
So, obviously they didn't get what and then they kept telling me, they said, all right, monologue goes first thing. You're not going to do a monologue. That's a little chancy or whatever. And then they said, if you're going in the audience and just talking to people randomly, it has to go. Basically, they said, well, we're just going to do quizzes. It'll just be a quiz show, like, You Bet Your Life or something like that. And pretty soon they even paired me out of it, which is what it came down to after all said and done.
Yeah. Well, it is chancy from a television point of view. So much of what you do, there's no predicting. It's essentially improvised. That's, I assume, what you like about it.
It's just how I work. I didn't ask to be in television. It was never one of my ambitions or goals. And I honestly had to say to myself, all right, here I am, your own best friend again. You should do it, because why wouldn't you at least give it a try, even though you don't want to do it, and you kind of hate these people like right off the bat. I took a lunch in L.A. at some, I forget which place it was, but I know it had a bust of John Lennon in the lobby, so he probably never stayed there when he was in L.A. But anyhow, so it was a business lunch, but pretty big table, quite a few people there. I didn't know any of them. Well, I knew the one guy who was supposed to be a producer, and there was one guy who was an executive producer, and there was a guy from Disney, and there was another guy from Disney, and some woman from Disney, and some people, I don't know who they were. So it was a breakfast lunch, breakfast meeting.
Yeah.
And I'm from Wisconsin. I go to breakfast.
Oh, you ordered some food.
4x4.
Yeah.
You know, they were paying for it. What the heck? Why
yeah.
wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And they were all sitting there with maybe a glass of some sort of tea and maybe a muffin, but they didn't even touch it. You know, and I was actually, grease was running down my face, and they were talking about expectations and lack of them, or so. I don't know what they're. You know, I was more concerned about the fact that I was the only one eating.
So culture.
That was the way the whole experience was.
Right. Did you ever think about leaving Madison?
Yeah. Well, in Chicago, I thought, I threw away all my clothes and everything. A lot of pictures that I should have kept. I thought I was leaving. I thought I was done with Madison, and then Chicago was going to be it. So but I never thought I'd end up in L.A.
Right.
That was pretty obvious.
Especially after that breakfast.
After the breakfast,
yeah. So you never get any food in you if you moved to L.A.
I've had bad experiences, though. And for example, I went to New York one time, and NBC station groups were thinking about doing a show. So the local guys from NBC in Chicago, and a couple of people I knew, and the guy who's the head of NBC stations in New York went to lunch out there. And it was at, what was the fish place? Le Bernardin.
Le Bernardin, yeah.
Le Bernardin, thank you. Le Bernardin. Le Bernardin. That was good fish.
Yeah.
Honest to God, that was the best. I don't know what it was, a flounder or a sea bass or something like that. And I'll tell you, it was the sauce. But anyhow, so there was this guy from, hard-boiled station manager. I don't even know what these guys do. And they said, so what do you want to do? What would you like to do on television? I said, I'll tell you what I don't want to do. This is so. I'll tell you what I don't want to do. I don't want to go out with a film crew and knock down the door of a black man's home and drag him out with his wife and baby screaming in the name of reality. That's what they were doing right now. There's all these police shows. They batter down someone's door and they go in the cameras, and you probably have the wrong place to begin with, and drag the guy out. And the guy from NBC said, my problem is I can't get enough of those shows. And he flipped the check to the guy from Chicago and left. He said, this is
You
for
sent him away from the table.
I did with that. And I honestly, it's so typical of me. I've had meetings, not usually as bad as that one, where I have the weirdest time to show some sort of idealism or so, or Madison, sensibility entirely, and I don't even know why. It's self-sabotage, but that was a good one.
Maybe you are an idealist. I'll
Not
tell you.
You are.
Well, describing radio, you demonstrate enormous idealism.
Well, I don't know. Hitler was an idealist.
That's the problem.
I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
That's the problem with idealism.
I think that you need to be somewhat idealistic, I suppose. But it was more self-sabotage than anything else, because I clearly didn't want to be doing. It was stupid. I've kicked myself about that, but not that it would have worked out anyway. But still.
Yeah.
And I've had meetings not that dissimilar from that, where I've said similar things, or been,
And it's worked?
Totally offensive. No, none of them have worked.
Oh, it's never.
That was send me hurtling back to Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember I spent a summer living in New York after high school, and I remember turning on the radio. It must have been one of the few times when I turned on the radio, because I was far away from home and I had a radio, and I turned it on, and there you were. And that's when it dawned on me that this is this thing that is happening all over the country, and that it's, I saw you as my neighbor. And it turned out it was reaching out from Madison and into people's homes and into people's lives.
Lake Wobegon all over again.
Yeah. Is that what you expected?
Is that what I expected?
Yeah.
No.
Because that's one of the only other examples I can think of something that's like deeply Midwestern, that has a very specific point of view that seems almost local in its sensibility. I mean, you're from Wisconsin, as you say. You have a very sort of Midwestern
Well, see, that's what Garrison was doing with Lake Wobegon also,
Yeah.
except that was an illusion, whereas Madison should be an illusion, but it isn't. I mean, actually, and the thing that was cool about it, people from all over the state, from Iowa, the big crowd from Iowa usually each time. People who come from Michigan sometimes get around that lake or over it. I don't know how they do it, or in Minnesota and stuff. And then they started coming from all over the country and stuff to be there. But it was a real sense of place, and that's a real sense of a real place.
Yeah,
which is a lot of what I liked about it.
That it was real, and as you said,
and I appreciated them
that they were real. And
and there was mutual appreciation, I would say, in that, and because I thought they're very cool, they're very positive, they're everything that you don't think exists anymore in America. Good sense of humor, they're tolerant, and some of them are quite conservative. Actually, I have people, we have ministers and we have people from different points of view, and some were conservative, but they had in common was a good sense of humor, and they're good people.
Yeah.
Everything that doesn't exist anymore, if you read the papers, or if you can stand to read the papers.
But
anymore.
it does exist. You're here to say it
exist.
does exist.
Yeah.
Did you see yourself as a family-friendly kind of guy?
No. That was incidental. I think when I had kids, and I had my kids on the air, almost literally.
Yeah.
And I started. I like talking to kids.
Yeah.
Always do. Even you.
Yeah.
What I could get in edgewise with you. You came in with a new shtick each day.
I came in with material.
You came in with material, which is unusual for an 8-year-old. And you're using the same material. I know.
Absolutely. It's been working.
So I always liked that, and I grew up in Milwaukee, Jewish in a German town, post-war. My best friends used to call me a dirty Jew, and I'd have to get over it. And it's if I wanted to play with them, So sometimes they do that if they got mad at you. Okay, all right. So that's what I grew up with. I tell this to my kids; they have no idea what I'm talking about. Anti-Semitism. What is that even? And it still exists, but people just aren't as overt about it. All those things, all those antis of any sort. But and my parents was always us and them. Understandably after the Holocaust, and especially in Milwaukee, German advocate. They almost went in on the side of Hitler, in the war. It was up in the air, so which side did go in
Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That was my background. So when I started teaching, first of all, I started meeting entirely different in Kenosha, sons and daughters of factory workers, great kids. I really appreciate it. A totally different world for me. And they'd ask me questions like, what does a Jew eat? Not what did you eat, but what does a Jew eat? And I would say, Christian babies or something, just to keep them on the right foot,
You don't want to completely disrupt everything.
No, I don't want to disillusion them as to what they're dealing with here. No, but and they were great kids. So I started to come out in a sense of, coming out of actually, opening up a little bit. Someone outside of the sort of where I was in the shell in Milwaukee there. And then doing the radio was all about audience. And these people were great.
Yeah.
We had people come in from the farm, who's babysitting the cows or whatever you do with cows when you're gone. And it was very interesting, just great people, and their lives, and old couples have been married for 60 years, and they say the first 60 are the hardest, the same thing, with each of them. Mm-hmm. But then stories, that they would tell, and or why they were there, or some, and
it's almost like you came into contact on a deep level with the them of us and them. Like these are all the people that your parents said, these are not like us. These people aren't like us.
And that's the whole thing about audience. They weren't just audience; they were actually people.
Yeah,
not an audience of people, and they're really good people. They were terrific. They would bring me things.
Yeah.
But more than that, they brought themselves, and it was very cool.
Michael Feldman missing the presence and the presence of his audience every week. Folks, I love your presence and I don't want to miss it. That's why I'm encouraging you to go to third-story.com and subscribe. If you sign up for the mailing list, I'll send you a little note every time there's a new episode. Like so many performers and public people, Feldman's life off the mic was considerably more low-key and private. Here he discusses why that might be. We close the conversation by considering the future. Despite his ambivalence about entering the world of podcasts and joining the podcast revolution, he is joining the revolution. His new podcast is launching this month, and you can check it out at his website, whadyaknow.net. So without further ado, here's my final part of my conversation with Michael Feldman.
What about your life outside of radio? I mean, I don't...
That was pretty dismal.
What do you mean it was pretty dismal?
Well, I've been married even longer than I was on radio.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. The girls are great too. My daughters are grown now, but
do you think you're
a lot of good material, and the kids.
I have one. It's been pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Do you think of yourself as a private person?
Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm.
What do you think that is? Two sides of the same coin. There's a part of you that turns on this very public thing.
Typical of performers in general. I think they're mostly introspective people. Well, once again, look at Garrison. There's some kind of a thing, psychology going on there. But it isn't expansive.
Yeah, right.
Effusive.
Yes.
It's very internal, and then he's able to bring that out in front of an audience because that's motivating to actually maybe sort of explain himself, And for me, it's a chance. It enabled me to come out of all my reservation, that I'm steeped in.
What reservations are you steeped in?
General sense of reservation.
About the world.
About me, about what I would. My mother's famous advice: don't start with the neighbors.
What did your mother think of you on the radio?
She liked it. She used to come on with me when I was doing my show in Dolly. She'd come on and give bad advice. And she was very funny, and she enjoyed that.
What were you doing Sunday through Friday? What was your work like? What was your schedule like to prepare for the show?
Packer season, on Sunday we'd be watching the game. The rest of the year was kind of chancy, iffy. I am working on the show. I put in about typically 4-hour day, sometimes 5.
And what would you do?
Monday through Friday was the big day when I tried to put it all together. I'd be writing some jokes, some ad libs or whatever, and reading some stuff or trying to, if I had a book to read, I would read that. And I don't know, there are things to do. Organize the show I was going to be on and try to get some guests on there and work with the producer to get somebody to show up for it.
Did you ever feel like you have drier weeks and more fruitful weeks in terms of the material coming to you, ideas?
No. It largely depended upon who the guest was and how good the book was. And, as far as my own monologue and stuff, that probably varied, but not much. Well, pretty much the same jokes. Just recycled. Yeah.
Did you see yourself as a humorist?
Not anymore. I'm just a private citizen now.
This is really affecting you. I can feel. I mean, I read some interviews with you, and I could tell that you were not pleased because the headline said things like "Michael Feldman is not pleased." It's something that has affected you like on an existential level, and yet you're about to start this podcast. Like, this is your opportunity, Michael, to say this is going to be big for all the folks that haven't been able to hear me in real time. You can download me anytime you want.
Yeah.
All of that.
Okay.
Stuff. You want me to
Fine, say that.
Okay. Good news.
Say I said that.
Good news, folks. I mean, do you look at this with...
I'm not driven.
Yeah, you're not driven. It's not the right
time.
In
in doing all this in the beginning, I found it very invigorating, and it made me want to do more and go out there. And I was very proud of our road shows. We did some great road shows, and we could be anywhere in the country, And I would specialize in knowing what I was talking about wherever I was.
Yeah.
So if you're in Columbia, Missouri, or if you're in Columbus, wherever there's a Columbus,
there's a few of them,
Missouri,
you
find out all I could find about it. Find out all the issues going on, all the hot buttons and stuff, and all the guests would sort of be reflecting some of the highlights and the funny, interesting personalities of the town, and we did some great shows. And I'm very proud of those. Because people who come up to me are going to say, you really got it.
you figured it out.
Then I forget about it, and I don't know what it was that I got, but So that was, to me, that was really a lot of fun.
And you don't feel that you're going to be able to connect on that level outside of Madison, at least in the near future, in the immediate future.
Was I saying that? That wasn't the point of that story. That was saying how good I was.
Oh, that was you saying how good
on the road. Yeah.
You did say now you're a private citizen, and it occurs to me that part of that sort of duality between being able to express yourself publicly once a week and then retreat internally for the rest of the time, which, as you say, is pretty common. It's like you're maybe going to be missing this part of your life.
Definitely. No, I miss my audience. So you got the Facebook thing going, so
Yeah.
they write in and say, "Oh, I'm so glad." But it will never be the same. I mean, this thing actually built up over decades.
Yeah.
And radio is not long form radio doesn't really exist anymore. So I'm now trying to do something that's sort of a simulation of that. It's all short form, and it will be a live audience, and it will be webcast, so we can take calls and so forth. I'm trying to, as much as possible, to make it like a live radio show, but in the end, it isn't.
Yeah.
Because it's not in real time.
And you're not motivated at this moment to reinvent the format or come up with some new thing. This is your
No,
format.
the format is quite different.
It is different.
Oh yeah, I say it's all short form, so
Yeah.
a lot of the same things, but quite,
Yeah.
but we're different within my parameters. No one is really much different than they are.
It's funny. I like you saying no one is much different than they are, because it seems to me that what happened with your show was basically a kind of coming into focus of who you are naturally at your core, with a format that worked to show that off and to be that person on a regular basis in public. And as you say, you didn't really change much. I mean, you stopped doing visual gags on the radio. That's the main change I can hear that you made over the years. Changed from one bass player named Jeff to a different bass player named Jeff.
Yeah, and now I don't have a bass player, so there's some progress.
That actually may be considered progress. Even I can get with that. When you realized that the show wasn't going to continue, you obviously had to reach inward. It was not my intention to talk exclusively about the show being over, but I do.
Go ahead.
But
That's all right.
I feel that this is where you
It's
are.
very
right
cleansing.
Now. You obviously have had to confront some real
Mortality.
truths here. Yes.
I'm opposed to it.
Do you think people have a hard time telling when you're being totally sincere?
I am always totally sincere. It's just I can't state it seriously, because that would not be sincere for me.
Have people asked you that before? That was a well thought out answer.
No, and it was not. It's just the way that's how I deal. That's my way of coping, and it's made me a living. So I can't complain. And honestly, even downtime or whatever this is, if I can keep a sense of humor, then I'm all right. I can't. If I start to deal with things actually the way they are, then I'm screwed.
But oddly, it is that sensitivity to the reality of life, of living, that I think has allowed you to connect with people. That's what I think is the flip side of being so expressive once a week and then retreating inward, is that you retreat inward and you feel the texture of what it is to be alive, and then you can deliver that to the rest of your audience.
I didn't know I did that.
That's what you did through.
I feel the texture of what it is to be alive.
Yes.
My father was in menswear for a while.
Well,
So I don't know if I do that or not, but I'll tell you, somewhere along the line, I really became interested in something other than myself. In this case, it was people in my audience, and of course my daughters, and that was a big change for me. It wasn't just being, funny or this and that or top and that. And the whole thing about, all right, so you can get in this thing, all right, if you're a guy who's supposed to be funny, then trying to, you talk to someone, the idea of topping them.
yeah.
And I always let people top me. I mean, if they get the last line and it's a laugh, that's the end of it, and I'm glad for it. I think that then I'm succeeding, And so that's something that I sort of had to be learned,
That you don't have to get the last laugh.
No, and it's not about me, it's about them, but if you can use the humor to bring them out, then it's sort of what works,
And you think having kids kind of quieted you?
Not quieted, but you got suddenly it's no longer about you,
Yeah.
and it's sort of that way in performing too. I mean, it is about you, but it's not. In my case, it's about me and vis-a-vis my audience. So your kids, it's totally about them. So you lose yourself entirely. But that's sort of freeing as well.
So maybe that's one of the frustrations with this pod thing, is that you feel like you're losing touch with your audience, even though it's your audience, your hardcore audience, that's asking you for this.
Well, we're having a live audience and
Yeah.
stuff there, so there'll be a bunch of people there. That'll help. And there will be a limited call-in function and so forth, but it's not the same as radio.
Is it going to be 2 hours long?
We're going to work in 2-hour sessions twice a month, September through December. This is like a trial heat for me anyway.
And pull them into hour long episodes? Or are you going to do two?
Yeah. So each would probably be like 40 minutes or something out of for each hour. So I have 2 podcasts coming from each session.
From what I'm seeing, for what it's worth, there are these weird little sweet spot lengths in podcasting. Like 12 minutes. People like these little 12-minute ones.
12 minutes.
Don't do 12. Don't do 12. I think 12 is silly. But then 40 also
I could do
seems to be
10
another-
podcasts out of a 2-hour show.
You could do a month of work and then go to Florida for a year
12
and a
minutes,
half.
honestly.
Yeah.
I could do 12 minutes standing on my head.
Yeah. I believe that you could. 12 minutes, you're down to 12.
What a great world it is.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
Michael Feldman, I don't know what to make of this conversation because I want to tell
Why
you
do you
that
have to make anything out of it?
I'm going to make a podcast out of
It
it.
should speak for itself.
I want to tell you that I am a fan, and I'm a fan of what you built from Madison. So I guess I'm sorry that you're feeling this. But
What am I feeling that you're sorry about?
Well, that you.
I don't like the age in which we live, I guess, technologically, certainly.
Well, that they pushed you off the air.
Well, that? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. Before you were ready.
But they waited 31 years to push me off the air.
Did you think after 25 years, I'll probably just do this until I'm ready to be done?
People would ask me that, 25th anniversary, and your dad was on that show, I
Yeah.
believe, yeah. And he said, well, how long can you do this? I said, well, another 25 maybe. I don't know, till they fire me. I always, my response to those sorts of things always was, listen, in public radio, if you get on and you stay under the radar, they'll never fire you.
Yeah.
It's like public service sector.
Yeah.
It's a job for life, I thought, almost.
And what reason did they give for firing you?
Oh, the numbers are off nationally and so forth, which is true because they're getting beaten out by all these other shows. Wait, don't tell me. The ones that are actually driven by a network and powered by it. And, things have a lifetime. What was surprising to me was that they didn't want to do anything with it back here. I said, well, okay, let's do it back in Wisconsin. We have a huge audience in Wisconsin, only audience in Wisconsin. And you can do it locally, and we can do a podcast of it to distribute it nationally instead of doing a network thing.
Yeah.
I said, well.
Do you think that what you built could be done again today?
No.
What's different?
Well, there is no radio to carry it. I mean, even public radio used to be on Saturdays. Eventually, the NPR and they had All Things Considered, and whatever that other one is called. A few more things considered. I don't know.
Something else considered.
Something was considered, and what was the other one? But when I started doing the weekends, Saturdays was when the program director played big band music.
Yeah.
At the local university extension station somewhere,
Yep.
wherever it was. Or sometimes they played bluegrass in Washington, D.C., the biggest public station there, AMU. Bluegrass was like bluegrass all night because that's what the guys liked. So that when we came in, it was actually, I was trying to do an entertainment show for distribution nationally, and was eating into the program director's bluegrass hour, so that's what you faced, So, I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. There's no open air to begin with.
No. Now, today you face the opposite,
Yeah.
which is a lot of people vying for
Yeah.
people's entertainment time and attention.
And I saw a thing, I was mentioned briefly, there are a lot of old-timers leaving the air, It was in the Washington Post or something. It was mainly about Garrison, of course, and the ramifications for the future of radio kind. And I was in the second to last paragraph. They gave me a thing. My feelings about podcasting. It's like pretending to do radio. It's what you do when you're pretending to do radio, I guess. Along the way, they said, "All right, he's going, and then where are the newcomers coming in radio, public radio? Because all the kids are going into podcasting. So they're not there. They had a few people who were still middle aged and doing radio, and they said, well, we're still here. And I'm only 45 years old.
Yes.
But it doesn't exist anymore. I think it's really certainly not in the form that it was.
You're right that there are even some shows that are now airing that started as podcasts, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right. That works backwards now.
But it works backwards now. But and I have some friends who work in the world of new media and social media who say, why is your goal to get a gig on the radio when radio is migrating to podcast? What does radio have to do with it at this point? This is this sort of new, this other way of thinking about it.
I think it's true, unfortunately.
So it couldn't be recreated. So you can't. It's just a question of timing. It's just you were here at the beginning, and you were an innovator, and you're still here. Yeah.
At the end.
And here you are at the end. What role in your life and your development did Groucho Marx play? Was he somebody that you thought about in your life? Was he somebody that you watched as a kid?
I thought he was related to us. So when I was a kid, I was in my pajamas. Before going to bed, I could watch You Bet Your Life. I remember that, actually, in our Motorola with the round screen. They let me watch Groucho. And I honestly thought he was obviously related somehow. Somebody's uncle or something. But he was funnier than any of the all the Feldmans had. My dad had sort of a Groucho-esque. A lot of asides. Like I always loved about Groucho was he would turn to the camera and say shit. And he's like talking to you. All this other stuff was not important. He's telling you what really was going on or making some crack. My dad did that all the time.
Did you do that too?
David A. Feldman.
Did you do that too? Did you pick that up, you think, from Groucho and your dad?
I think my radio is all asides.
Yes.
There's no content. It's all asides. That's what I do. But my dad was a master of asides. I always thought, and he'd say these totally kind of obscene things, but they'd be in Yiddish a lot of times to me. And I was, like 12 years old, and he'd say, what? But I appreciated it, and it was funny. As soon as I learned out what it meant, I definitely appreciated it more. But
I mean, it's very funny to me to think that that this sort of technique and this point of view that is essentially Jewish, and that it came to you in Yiddish even. This is a humor that resonated deeply with a culture that didn't have any concept of Jewish humor or Yiddish humor.
What's your thesis here?
My thesis is that you basically learned, copied your dad and Groucho Marx, and that was an influence for you in terms of humor. And it turned out that it worked well in the Midwest, and you had a lot of mailmen, and people would leave their cows at home and come and check you out, and you were doing a kind of shtick that had a very Jewish point of view. Yeah,
I don't know if it's a Jewish point of view, but because I don't know, does it exist now? Humor was always a saving grace. But I think it's been that way for a lot of cultures, probably. But at one point, that was the one that I was familiar with,
Right.
And it was mostly in terms of asides and saying things under your breath or little things you do like this. I don't even know what that would be.
Yeah, a little turn of the screw.
Yeah, a little twist or something, or maybe twisting the knife. I don't know, not exactly, but
And did people early on say to you, "Oh, you kind of like Groucho Marx," or there's something kind of Groucho-esque
about
you?
Got that. It wasn't intentional.
And when I
was more Dave Feldman than I was Groucho Marx.
But they don't know Dave Feldman.
That's their problem.
Yeah.
It's a big loss for them.
Michael Feldman, thank you for taking this afternoon with me in Madison.
Thanks, Leo. You growed up so nice.
Oh, well, I'm just trying to keep up.
There he was, Michael Feldman, inventing his own career 30 years at a time. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I encourage you to go to third-story.com and check out conversations with some other self-invented people, including Clifford Irving, Peter Coyote, and George Wein. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.